it doesn't matter if you have the number one podcast or you have the 100,000 podcasts in the world. If the soul of the podcast is to generate leads or get sales or do something else, because that's the goal.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast. I'm Richard Tobinger, the founder, and I'm also joined by Kylie Slavek, our head of storytelling and brand development. Hi, Kylie.
Hello.
And today we've got a special treat. We're going to be talking to another digital agency. We're going to be talking to Tom Gibbons. He's over in Ireland, and we're going to have kind of an agency to agency chat. Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Kylie. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I know you have had one of the top podcasts in Ireland. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to start your own agency. And then it sounds like you started a podcast too. So can you share a little bit with the listeners so we have a little bit of background?
Yeah, sure. So my first, I've always been kind of that kid that was selling sweets and DVDs and everything in the school playground. But when I was about 13 years of age, I discovered buying domains and selling domains online. So my very first part of digital space was I used to buy computer games and albums. So I owned things like Pro Evolution 5 and things like that. I used to park them before Google and get commission from that. I remember in IT classes, I was like to everyone, click here to drive basically PPC, what we call it nowadays, to my site, and I would get commission from it. So I suppose in a weird way, I've just realized that that's kind of like data farming at the very core, at the very beginning. But yeah, so I started off in there, went and did a marketing degree, focused on digital, I've worked for a jewelry company, I've worked for activewear, I've worked for a experience days company. Then I moved to Ireland for my partner, and I went and worked for Topaz and rebranded them in the biggest spend in Ireland in 2018 to Circle K. Then I worked as the marketing director at the TEFL Academy, and I worked my way up to CEO. I had great success there, but realized at the end of the year that I was kind of ready. I felt like I'd earned my stripes, and I went and worked for myself freelance and absolutely loving the new life I've created for myself.
That sounds like a big shift. So you shifted from helping corporates build their brands, and then what's been the thing that you've liked the most about kind of running your own agency and helping other people get their work in the world?
Well, from a personal level, the thing I've loved the most is I get to go to the gym every morning, and I start work when I want to start work. But I actually, part of me wishes I went freelance earlier, because I've got to work with several different clients in several different industries, and I feel like for me myself as a digital marketer, I needed different industries and different areas to work in to really grow further. If it wasn't for that, I feel like if you're in a certain industry or space, you can get quite static after a while. You know what works to some extent. You can bring in new marketing elements. But when I was CEO, the last role, I felt like I was doing a lot of business decisions, and I kind of lost what I love in the space, which is marketing and coming up with campaigns and building out. And a lot of my time was focused on development of others, and fixing. A lot of the time you're firefighting in those top positions. So by working for myself, I've learned new technologies. I've experienced so many different industries, and the growth there has been huge.
A lot of our people are interested in reinvention, and you mentioned rebranding. What's your process for that?
Yeah, so rebranding is a big one, because what I'm strong at in rebranding is bringing so many new areas to a business that they might not necessarily have. But visually, I know what I like, but I really value graphic designers. I'm as good as probably anyone in terms of Canva, actually, to come up with building templates and actually being completely unique and coming up with themes and campaigns. I think a lot, like, a freelancer, and a lot of the time, one of the biggest skills in digital marketing is understanding, even if initially you're slightly better than someone in a space, if they're doing the same thing for 40 hours a week or plus, they're eventually going to quickly outrun your couple of hours and your knowledge previously in that space. In terms of rebranding, I think just getting a really good remarketing campaign is the key to a good rebrand. So using things like ad roll, making sure your display campaign, anyone that follows your networks, just try and hit everyone you can in a remarketing sense, using your Meta business manager, and making sure you remarket on all the different social media platforms, as well as your own website and your email database. If you can do all those areas, remarketing should be a breeze.
And I know you help people kind of get their messages in front of people. And I know you have some kind of more, like, I'd say, like ground level guerrilla kind of tactics. If somebody wants to get their content in front of people, could you share a bit more about, how maybe a therapist or healer or small business could take some content they have and maybe get in front of the people that they really want to see it?
Yeah, so this is actually something I've been doing a lot more for my clients because they're seeing the value quite quickly. There's a couple of different outreach tools, and it's funny because a lot of these outreach tools, they see themselves as link building, but I use them for a different reason. So Respona is the one I'm using at the moment, but there's things like Ninja Outreach, and there's a couple others out there. What I would do with businesses and clients, so let's say we'll keep with this meditation industry for a second. So I would ask a client, okay, who inspires you in the industry? Who do you think would be a great place to get your work out to? The client will have one or two, maybe they'll have a list of 20, but it's not a big list. And so what I try and do is I try and identify as many as I can, a good couple of hours work, and try and identify, let's say, the bones of 1,000 different websites, podcasts, anything you can think of in those industries. And then what I'll use is Respona. There's an area in it where you can put in the domain, and it will scrape the website for any emails associated to it. And they'll identify the emails of the contacts and their LinkedIn profile. So you can basically then create a network of all these emails, all these LinkedIns, touch base with them. It's brilliant for journalists. If you ever wanted to be on, I'm obviously based in Ireland, but the Irish Times, or, if you're in America, New York Times, or wherever you're based, you can find the journalists for every area, every industry, or categories within those websites, because some of those, the Irish Times has so many different areas. So let's say you want to focus on the travel section or the business section or something like that. So I would create all these databases of all the key people you see. And then if you want to then connect with them, you can either play the long play and learn about them and start liking their content and producing and playing a long play side of things. Or it can be as simple as pull those emails, put it into very much like a remarketing campaign I just said there, and start marketing your messaging and start getting your product out indirectly without making the leap of emailing them straight. But yeah, there's several ways of going about it, but I think that's a really underrated play in building your network. Understand who you want to connect with and who you want to market to.
How did you get to have the #1 podcast in marketing in Ireland?
That's a really good question. I use my podcast a lot of the time as a networking tool. So my ambition is to connect with everyone via LinkedIn first and foremost, but connect with everyone in digital on LinkedIn, which is a mad goal and something I'd love to maybe, I could reach in a couple of years' time, but probably not. And the idea is, whenever you're trying to connect with someone on a platform like LinkedIn, it's, it's weird. You can say, oh, I'm expanding my reach and stuff, but if you don't know someone, it's a really strange thing to connect with someone. So by connecting with people and having the podcast, I obviously offer, I say, listen, I've seen your experience. I think you're really interesting. I'd love you to be part of my show. I try to be as inclusive as possible. There's not really an area I wouldn't cover on my podcast when it comes to digital marketers or marketers in general, or business owners and things like that. The show can go either way. So by having that tool and having that ambition and understanding that LinkedIn and TikTok are really the only good organic social media platforms out there, I connect with these people. They come on my show. I'll try and do a really good 60-40 or 70-30, or I try and give as much value to the guest as possible to my show. I really try and promote them. I help them out with anything. I'll even give, work advice if they ask for it. And as a result, most people on LinkedIn, they'll have, 300, 400 connections, unless they've actively worked on their LinkedIn profile. And so knowing that, if they post all of a sudden, because this a lot of the time it's their first time on a show, they'll post and they'll have 200 people that have listened to it, and then of that 200 you might retain 10-20% onto other episodes and onto the show. But if the format's good and you find good value in the show, you'll tend to get more people listening. And then on top of that, I try and keep a high level of updating. So the podcast algorithm, you're always looking at posting once a week is not really going to get you high up in the charts unless you have a massive name or a massive following and community built behind you already. So back to the meditation example, really, if you're starting off and you love the space and you might have a little side business on it or something before, the reality is you don't have that established network, not like someone that's been in media years or Hollywood star or something. You see these podcasters coming in, they already have an established market. So if you were in meditation and you were trying to promote your name, the best thing you could probably do is find out a way of how can you connect with your community? How can you find those other people of interest, whether it's a Reddit or a LinkedIn or whatever, and you connect with them, you get them in, and it's about consistency. So I post 3 times a week, and then in between the days I'm not posting, I'll market those days as well. So I use things like Headliner, take snippets out of the show, or repurpose them. And so if you're thinking the kind of spikes, you get that spike of the episodes the day you've posted, but then you get further spikes down the road because you're promoting it other times. And if you do that several times over, you're growing your LinkedIn, you're growing your networks. People are recommending and sharing because, a family member will listen to that one podcast that someone's on, which isn't long-term value, but it still provides to the spike. And so all those combinations that's how I got my show to #1 several times over.
Yeah, that's really, it's really fascinating. I mean, I think we are about a 1 time a week kind of podcast, because it's kind of like a probably auxiliary marketing technique for us. But we have thought, like, how do we actually crank this up? So now we know we have some techniques. It's kind of interesting. All the different agencies have different things they focus on. I'd be kind of curious on your perspective, because I think sometimes there's a misperception that you go to an agency and all of a sudden they're gonna get you #1 and get you ranking or whatever. And I think I guess the question specifically for you would be, what's the role of the creator and how they bring you content and create content, and then your role as an agency? Because I think probably a lot of people just wish they could just outsource it 100% and never touch it again and have you do all the work and be #1. But I don't really think that's the reality. So I'm kind of curious what your thinking is on the breakdown, and then what you actually ask of your creators so that you can actually be successful as an agency.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Richard. So I suppose first and foremost, if you're an agency representing a business, the business has to be all in. If you're working with business owners who want the world, and usually those ones don't want to pay the world either, but if they want the world, but they're not willing to put themselves out there either on camera or in written form, or they don't want to be interviewed and do those sort of things, you're already fighting a losing battle. Because I find with business, the only person that really is 100% in, and the only person that should be 100% in, is the owner. Unfortunately, that's the case. You can't expect your employees to be the face of your business or to give you that kind of long-term 10 years, 20 years at your business. It's great when it happens, but and you've done a lot of right things if you have retained your staff that long. But the reality is the owner has to some extent be the voice. Now I know, there's definitely good platforms out there that and good businesses that have used spokespeople from the business, but the spokesperson or the face does have to be technically someone within, because they have the inside knowledge. If you're an agency, we might only work on your account at best twice a week, but maybe once a week and stuff. Usually we'll have several clients and several responsibilities. And so we cannot understand the full functioning of a business. It doesn't matter how hard we try and how much we think we know. We can't necessarily be that spokesperson. And also, as soon as the relationship expires in whatever way, or that person that was the spokesperson on the agency side or business side, as soon as they leave, could even be for a couple of months, or there's an illness or something, it could be anything. You've lost all your content. So my first part is, in the discussions with the business, this will all be aired out. And at the end of the day, it's the business owner's point of view, what they think and what they see. And you can always reintroduce new hosts and stuff. I get all that, but it would be clear dialogue with the owners. And then secondly, it doesn't matter if you have the #1 podcast or you have the 100,000th podcast in the world. If the soul of the podcast is to generate leads or get sales or do something else, because that's the goal. And you might only have 50 different listeners every week. And so your listenership looks like 50, but let's say, for example, in this mad example I'm giving, but let's say it's 50 new listeners every week, Richards. All of a sudden, you're producing 1 or 2 sales or leads, because the value of the information you're giving in the show is achieving what the real business objective is. You track that and you say that's the reason for these sales, for this objective. I think business owners and businesses in general, sometimes, they want the world, but they actually don't know what they want. Sometimes you have to break it down and say, I have clients sometimes and say, I want my organic traffic to be, X amount of sessions and so on. But then you can do that, and then you find out their inquiries hasn't gone up because the traffic wasn't relevant, or the long tail form, or for whatever reason. And fundamentally, they get upset because they haven't got the inquiries in. And then you have to have the discussion of, well, why did you want the traffic up if you wanted your inquiries up? Do you notice that kind of thing? So it's all about the communication and thinking about that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, just backpedaling a little bit. When you said TikTok and LinkedIn were the best organic, we don't do a lot of organic. We do a lot of paid. And so Facebook and Instagram are kind of where we spend a lot of time. So I'm so curious about LinkedIn, because I almost never hear anybody talk about LinkedIn as a good place to spend time and resources. Why do you do that? How did you discover it? Tell me all the things.
Kylie, you're going to love this, because not only that, I think I've noticed some things on LinkedIn that I haven't heard anywhere. So maybe there's some value here. So yeah, fundamentally, from an organic posting point of view, LinkedIn and TikTok are the best 2 platforms. To explain that for anyone listening in kind of a layman terms, let's say you have 1,000 followers on Facebook, 1,000 followers on Instagram, 1,000 on Twitter, 1,000 on LinkedIn, and 1,000 on TikTok. So I'm sorry for saying them all out, but I would consider those the 5 major platforms out there, social media, away from your YouTubes. So if you post on Facebook to your 1,000 audience, you'd be lucky to hit 100 of them. That's the reality of Facebook's algorithm at the moment, because they're built, and you've got to realize that most social medias, they're all trying to get into that paid model. So eventually they are going to all flip to this kind of Facebook model. But so Facebook, first and foremost, you have 1,000, you post, you're probably going to hit about 100 people. For Instagram and Twitter, if you post, you're probably going to hit between 30 and 40%. So 300 or 400 people. Then if you post on LinkedIn, you're going to get close to your 1,000s when you're posting, and you have a better opportunity for sharing and liking and hitting more of your reach. But TikTok at the moment, you can easily, if you keep up with the algorithm, and you have to post several times a day for the TikTok algorithm to really kick in for you, but you could have that 1,000 followers, but you're hitting 20, 40, 50,000 in your organic posting. So when I talk organic, LinkedIn and TikTok are the ones I'd recommend. But you're right with Kylie, what you're saying around Facebook and Instagram. They both have the best targeting paid tools behind them, so that when you're creating lookalike groups, which see the changes of iOS are affecting those, but if you're trying to hit new audiences or target audiences that you've identified really well, them two are the best 2 platforms for scaling and putting paid spend behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always interesting for creators. They're always trying to figure out which platform and where to go, and then I think it's also interesting because it's kind of like the game with that changes the rules every week or every month, you know. So they're always shifting the algorithms and changing things up, and I guess this is the nature of digital marketing. You know, why it makes it kind of exciting and interesting in the world. I want to shift gears a little bit because I know that you've done some stuff with some festivals, and there's like a sustainability conference coming up, and just kind of shift into some more conscious marketing things. Can you tell me kind of what's going on in Europe in that world, and you know how marketing's kind of changing, you know, from what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think right now one of my clients, I'm working for Market Further Festival, which is on the 21st of October. And it handles some of the big topics in emerging technologies, things like AI, 5G, data analytics, things like that, robotics, then opportunity drivers like climate change, sustainability, energy, which is the buzzword around the world at the moment, and then innovation and ways to scale business, whether that's funding or identifying talent and things like that. So that's one of the events I'm marketing for and helping the team out there. And some of the founders and some of the tech that because I've been into meetings and looked around, and it's amazing what goes on. Do you know, you always hear, like, for example, now the technology of our smartphones had, what as much tech in terms of processors and stuff as what the NASA team had when they sent their first spacecraft into space and things like that. But the fact that there's so many places in this world that has technology that's, way more advanced than what it becomes commercially to the rest of us. And I suppose this particular event, what I find exciting about it is you're getting exposed to like the biggest innovations in robotics or artificial intelligence and things like that. And you're like, it's Mad Max stuff. You're thinking, where is this coming from? But yeah, I think it's definitely a festival without going into different areas and different businesses. It's one to check out and have a look at.
So what's the sustainability robot connection?
Neither. There's not a connection between the two, but sustainability is different ways of merging 2 or 3 into energy. But I think we've all heard nowadays about solar panel energy and hydro energy and things like that. But then there's a lot of places in Europe, especially, that are playing around with gravitational energy, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of. So it's like a massive, I'm going to do the worst description ever because this is not my area, but it's just what I've read to some extent. It's like it's a massive weight, and it slowly uses the gravity to go down, and the kinetic energy from that is producing a source of energy. So it's like I think they're looking at like old mines and stuff which have deep holes, and then the weight is obviously going down, building electricity, and then they just like pull it back up and it goes down again. And it's a natural way of, there's no, we're not using, any fusion or anything. We're just using the Earth's gravity to produce the energy. So maybe that's a good example.
Yeah, I think it's one of our kind of underlying values and beliefs at Conscious Marketer is that information changes consciousness, and also that marketing can be a force for good in the world. And it's kind of fun because we don't talk to that many agencies, on the podcast. And so, but you can even just see, like, there's probably all kinds of things that we're talking about. If you're a listener listening, that you're like, what is he talking about there? Or what did he say there? And so I think there's a certain magic when you can maybe find an agency or a partner that really knows all the background lingo and cares about you as a client to help you achieve and get your message out in the world. And then to realize, as a creator, go into an agency that you're not really meant to learn it all yourself, but you're meant to find somebody that like really is professional and cares deeply about like helping people get their things into the world, hopefully in a conscious way, So I think there's an exciting mix, and I think turning to an agency like yours or like ours is that there's a match, or sometimes it's that you can find somebody to bring inside your company as well that has that same passion. And then on the creator side, kind of like what you said before, is they still have to show up with the content, and they still have to be all in. And it's not like it's okay, I've found the agency now. It's like hands off, it's like, it's all good now, Yeah. Like the magic's going to happen. So we're not like magic makers. It's more like a partnership. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And you said it so well. And I think what's important is the fact, Richard, you and Kylie are on this show, giving your views, giving your thoughts on your areas of market and stuff. It builds up. It's from a market's point of view, it's top of funnel for us. From a listener's point of view, it's almost like you're getting to understand and know the people you potentially will work with just by listening to them and understanding their thoughts. And the reality is, nothing really successful has been built by an individual. It's all about a group, a collective, a community of people all working together, whether it's a product or any kind of business. It's normally built on individuals. So yeah, you just need to, from a agency point of view, it's about education, just not trying to lose the client, but trying to keep them up to date with what you're working on and why this will work. And then from a client's point of view, it's about understanding there's a level of trust, but fundamentally a business is based on yourself. It's you're making the decisions. That's the beauty of business, is you fall on your own sword. So you have to still do your due diligence and your work there.
I like what you said about working together and collaborating and building communities. We have a lot of solopreneur clients in certain programs that we teach. How would you guide them? What are the steps to take to move from being a solopreneur to building those communities?
Yeah, so really good question. Number one, I think from our point of view, the agency point of view, is to show several options, not the option that suits us for growth. So for example, we'll because we're on a podcast, we can use a podcast as a really good example for them. So if you're a solo entrepreneur, you're probably not going to have a big budget for a lot of things, and podcasting is a really good way of you know, you can use things like Audacity, which is a free editing tool. You can use Zoom and all these different recording platforms to produce the actual podcast episodes. And then you have all the social medias to touch base with someone. So you could explain this to your client and say, listen, we can edit your podcast, or we could do your outreach for your podcast, or we could do these kind of things for your podcast. But fundamentally, it's then for the client to decide, am I going to go with this? Are they going to work until 10, 11 in the evening, networking and outreach and building their product, or coming up with a show idea or a different question? So it's for us to produce the options out there at the moment. Like, for example, right now, probably the biggest opportunity in digital is YouTube Shorts. And in social media, for anyone listening, the social media platforms, whenever they bring something new into the platform, so let's say Instagram, which a lot of people are familiar with, Instagram was first a picture-based platform, then it integrated stories, then it integrated Instagram Reels. Reels is the latest version of their platform. So it's the one where if you're posting Reels, you're going to get the biggest reach on the platform. Like, if you're scrolling for Instagram now, you look through a picture and you scroll down to the next picture, it shows you a reel, and then you have to click into the reel to see the video properly, and then you're stuck in Instagram Reels. There's a reason for these things, but if you understand that, if you're keeping up to date on the different social media platforms, there'll be a change on Facebook fairly soon, and Facebook will push a lot of their audience and traffic in there. So if you have an already established Facebook page or group, which a lot of people do, if you go with the latest version of what's going on, Facebook want people to interact with it. So the cost is going to be, from a pay point of view, really cheap, and the organic reach will be there. So, you know, Facebook Lives, when they first came out, all of a sudden you could wake up your audience in some ways. And it's about us, again, the agencies, explaining to the clients, these are the things that happen. Are you going to adapt? Are you going to be prepared? And you get better and better working with the clients. Over time, you get better and better at optimizing and reacting to these things.
Well, it's been a really amazing conversation. I really like where we ended, where, you know, you have to constantly be adapting and pivoting in real time as they're changing the methods and the ways. And it's not so much you find one thing and then you just run it for like 3 or 4 years. You know, it generally doesn't work too well. We've covered a lot of areas. I really especially liked how you shared both how you built your podcast and also how to use LinkedIn, because I think it's an area that a lot of clients can use in their businesses. Tom, if people want to know more about you, where do they find out more about you online?
Yeah, so my podcast, which is very similar to yours and a great show, it's called the Digital Marketing Insight Show. You find me on LinkedIn or other places, Tom Gibbons, and my business website is brightsidedigital.io. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, head over, subscribe to Tom's podcast, and check out his digital agency, especially if you're in Europe. And thanks for all the listeners being here today, for being on the Conscious Marketer podcast. And if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes or another platform and you want the digital notes, you can go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast to get all the episodes and all the links over to Tom's site. Thank you so much, Tom, for being here with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.